In a world that constantly demands our attention and opinions, the idea of saying nothing feels almost unnatural. We're conditioned to believe that silence is weakness, that it's better to speak, even if we have nothing meaningful to say. But what if the opposite were true? What if silence could be a tool for inner strength, clarity, and even influence? The ancient Stoics certainly thought so. The Stoics understood the power of silence long before our modern world complicated it with social media and 24/7 news cycles. They believed that the more you controlled your tongue, the more you controlled your life. It wasn't just about holding back words, but about mastering your emotional responses, reflecting on situations before reacting, and finding wisdom in stillness. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, Epictetus reminds us, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. In this journey of learning the silent power of saying nothing, let's explore how embracing quiet can help you win not just arguments, but life itself. From creating mental clarity to earning respect in relationships, the art of silence has the potential to transform your approach to challenges. Let's start by unraveling this ancient wisdom, one lesson at a time. Lesson 1. Silence creates space for clarity. The first lesson in understanding the power of silence is that it creates space for clarity. Think of all the times when emotions ran high, during arguments, disagreements, or moments of frustration, and you spoke too soon. Words tumbled out before you had time to truly think, and later you may have regretted what was said. Silence, however, allows you to step back, take a breath, and gain control of your emotions before responding. When you stay quiet, you give yourself the chance to observe the situation from a calm, detached perspective, rather than one that is clouded by anger, anxiety, or impulse. Silence acts like a pause button for your mind. It's in that brief pause where clarity begins to form. By holding your tongue, you allow your thoughts to settle, much like how muddy water clears when left undisturbed. The Stoics believed that wisdom lies in responding only when you are truly prepared, and silence gives you the opportunity to prepare well. Instead of reacting emotionally, you create space to think logically and deeply about the situation. This is when you can analyze not only your own emotions, but also the intentions and motivations of others. In a heated conversation, silence can change the dynamics entirely. When you refuse to engage in immediate back and forth, it often leaves the other person caught off guard. They expect a quick response, a counter-argument, but your silence forces them to reflect on their own words. It creates a moment of discomfort for them, one that often leads to self-awareness. In these moments, silence is not just about holding back, it becomes a subtle form of power. You take control of the conversation not by speaking, but by carefully deciding when and if you will contribute. This approach is especially useful in negotiations, where the person who speaks less often ends up gaining more simply by allowing the other side to reveal their cards first. In daily life, silence can also be a tool for gaining clarity within yourself. We live in a world full of distractions, constant chatter from social media, the pressure to always have an opinion, the urge to reply instantly to messages and emails. All of this noise can make it difficult to hear your own thoughts. But when you practice silence, even for a short period, you create a mental space where your mind can focus and process information more effectively. The Stoics often used this practice of reflective silence to gain insight into their own values and desires. By stepping away from the noise of the outside world, they were able to connect more deeply with their inner wisdom. For example, Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, would often retreat into silence before making important decisions. He knew that clarity doesn't come from rushed thinking, but from stillness. In that silence, he could strip away distractions, assess his true priorities, and respond with purpose and intention rather than with knee-jerk reactions. So, silence is not about inaction or avoidance. It's about creating the mental and emotional space to make decisions from a place of clarity. When you learn to embrace silence, you gain control not only over your words, but over your mind. You gain clarity that enables you to respond with wisdom, patience, and a clear sense of direction. Lesson 2. Silence helps you master your emotions. The second lesson in understanding the power of silence is that it helps you master your emotions. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by strong feelings, anger, frustration, fear, or even excitement. These emotions often push us to speak impulsively, blurting out thoughts or reactions that we haven't fully processed. While it may feel cathartic in the moment, speaking without control often leads to regret, misunderstandings, and unnecessary conflict. Silence, however, acts as a shield against these emotional outbursts, allowing you to regain control before emotions take over. When you choose to stay silent during an emotional storm, you're giving yourself time to pause and reflect. In that quiet space, you can observe your feelings without letting them dictate your actions. This practice is at the core of emotional intelligence. Instead of reacting impulsively, you respond mindfully. Think about the last time someone made you angry. Maybe it was a rude comment or unfair criticism. Your initial reaction might have been to snap back or defend yourself immediately. But what if, instead, you chose silence? What if you took a moment to let that anger pass, reflected on the situation, and then responded calmly? The outcome would likely be much more positive and controlled. The Stoics often emphasize the importance of mastering emotions rather than being mastered by them. They recognize that emotions are temporary and often irrational, but by staying silent in moments of high emotion, you create a gap between feeling and action. In this gap, you gain the power to decide how to respond rather than letting the emotion dictate your words. It's not about suppressing your feelings, but about acknowledging them, allowing them to settle, and then responding in a way that aligns with your true intentions. Imagine this scenario. You're in a meeting at work, and a colleague unfairly criticizes your project in front of the whole team. Your immediate emotional response might be defensiveness or anger. You might feel the urge to interrupt, correct them, or explain yourself. But if you remain silent for a few moments, you give yourself the opportunity to assess the situation with a cooler head. Is their criticism valid? Did they misunderstand something, or are they simply venting their own frustrations? By staying quiet, you allow yourself to process the emotional trigger without lashing out. Later, you can respond in a measured and thoughtful way, preserving both your integrity and your professional relationships. In relationships too, silence can be a powerful tool for managing emotions. We all know how easy it is to let a small disagreement spiral into a major argument when emotions take control. But when one person chooses silence, it creates a pause in the emotional escalation. This pause can diffuse tension and give both parties a chance to cool down. By mastering the art of silence, you're not avoiding the issue. Rather, you're approaching it with a clear, level-headed perspective that is more likely to lead to resolution than conflict. Another benefit of silence in emotional situations is that it gives you time to reflect on whether or not a response is even necessary. Often we feel compelled to react to everything, as though every comment or situation requires our input. But when we stay silent, we realize that not every emotion deserves a reaction, and not every situation needs a response. In fact, silence can sometimes communicate more than words ever could. By not reacting, you send a message of self-control, composure, and inner strength, qualities that are far more powerful than any emotional outburst. Ultimately, mastering your emotions through silence is about taking control of your inner world. It's about recognizing that while you can't always control what happens to you, you can always control how you respond. In choosing silence, you choose patience, wisdom, and emotional resilience. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or avoiding confrontation, but rather responding to life's challenges with thoughtfulness and intentionality. In a world where emotions can easily spiral out of control, silence is the key to staying grounded and mastering your emotional responses with grace. Lesson 3. Silence builds stronger connections. The third lesson in mastering the power of silence is its ability to build stronger connections. In a culture where talking is often valued more than listening, we tend to believe that communication means constantly filling the air with words. But in reality, true connection comes not from how much we say, but from how well we listen. Silence plays a critical role in creating meaningful interactions because it opens up space for others to speak, reflect, and feel truly heard. It's in these quiet moments that relationships, whether personal or professional, are strengthened. When we speak, we often focus on getting our own point across. We may not realize it, but during conversations, we're often thinking about what to say next, rather than truly listening to what the other person is expressing. Silence flips that dynamic. When you choose to stay quiet, you're giving the other person the full space to share their thoughts, without interruptions or the pressure to match your energy. This silence shows respect, patience, and genuine interest in their perspective. It's a small, often unnoticed gesture, but it has a powerful effect on deepening the bond between people. In professional settings, silence can be especially effective. For instance, in negotiations or business discussions, we often feel compelled to talk and assert our position. But experienced negotiators know that silence can be a powerful tool. When you stay quiet after making a point, you give the other person room to process, reflect, and potentially reveal more than they intended. It's in these silent gaps that people often fill in the blanks, giving away critical information or softening their stance, simply because the quiet feels uncomfortable. Silence in these moments is not passive, it's strategic. By listening more and talking less, you often gain the upper hand without having to dominate the conversation. In personal relationships, silence fosters intimacy. Think about the most meaningful conversations you've had with someone you're close to. Often, the moments of silence between words, the pauses where emotions linger, are just as important as the words themselves. In these moments, silence allows feelings to resonate more deeply, creating a space where both people can connect on an emotional level that goes beyond words. When you hold space for someone in silence, you give them the freedom to express themselves fully without feeling rushed or judged. This builds trust, emotional safety, and a deeper sense of understanding. Moreover, silence can be an antidote to conflict. When tensions rise, our instinct is usually to talk over each other, trying to get our point across as fast as possible. But silence in these moments can be incredibly disarming. Instead of escalating the conflict with more words, silence allows the situation to breathe. It gives both parties a chance to cool down, reflect, and approach the discussion with clearer minds. Silence doesn't mean ignoring the issue. It simply creates space for a more thoughtful, measured conversation. In this way, it can prevent arguments from spiraling out of control and promote healthier communication. Another way silence strengthens connections is by allowing you to observe and understand others more fully. When you're not constantly thinking about your own response, you become more attuned to the subtleties of what the other person is communicating, not just through their words, but through their tone, body language, and emotional cues. Silence sharpens your perception. It lets you pick up on the unspoken messages that often carry more weight than the words themselves. This deeper level of understanding fosters empathy and makes your relationships more authentic because you're truly seeing and hearing the other person. In a world where everyone seems to be vying for attention, silence sets you apart. It shows that you don't need to dominate a conversation to be influential. Instead, you can build influence by being the person who listens deeply, responds thoughtfully, and understands people better than they understand themselves. This kind of connection, based on empathy, patience, and true understanding, is rare but incredibly powerful. Ultimately, silence isn't just about what you don't say. It's about what you gain when you hold back. It's about creating space for deeper, more meaningful connections with others. Whether in personal relationships, professional interactions, or even casual conversations, silence is a tool that, when used wisely, builds trust, fosters understanding, and strengthens bonds in ways that words alone cannot. Lesson 4. Silence enhances self-discipline. The fourth lesson in embracing the power of silence is its ability to enhance self-discipline. In a world where immediate reactions and instant gratification dominate, staying silent requires an immense amount of restraint, but that very restraint is what builds self-discipline, a quality essential for personal growth, success, and emotional well-being. Silence, in this context, becomes a practice in patience and control. It's about learning to resist the urge to react impulsively and instead take a step back, think carefully, and act with intention. We live in an era of constant communication. Whether through social media, messaging apps, or face-to-face conversations, the pressure to respond quickly is immense. We feel compelled to offer our opinions, defend ourselves, or prove a point, often without taking the time to fully process our thoughts. This knee-jerk reaction is a lack of self-discipline, where emotions and impulses override our ability to think critically. Silence disrupts this pattern. It forces us to pause and evaluate the situation before diving in, giving us time to consider whether responding is even necessary, and if so, how we should do it in a way that aligns with our long-term goals rather than short-term satisfaction. The Stoics understood this concept well. For them, self-discipline was a core virtue, and silence was one of the tools that helped cultivate it. By choosing to stay quiet when emotions flare, you gain the upper hand, not over others, but over yourself. In those moments when you want to lash out in anger, defend yourself against criticism, or prove someone wrong, silence becomes a powerful exercise in controlling your impulses. The ability to hold back when every fiber of your being wants to react is where self-discipline is born. Each time you choose silence over a hasty response, you strengthen your ability to manage your emotions and actions, which in turn makes you more resilient in the face of challenges. Imagine a situation where someone criticizes your work publicly. Your first instinct might be to defend yourself, to explain why they're wrong, or misunderstand your intentions. But by responding immediately, you might end up saying something defensive or even unkind, driven by emotion rather than logic. Now imagine if, instead of reacting in the moment, you chose silence. You pause, reflect on the criticism, and allow the initial emotional sting to pass. In that quiet moment, you not only avoid saying something you might regret, but you also give yourself time to assess the situation more objectively. Is there some truth to the criticism? Could it be an opportunity for growth? Or is it simply an unfair attack that doesn't warrant a response? Silence gives you the clarity to make that distinction, and it's that clarity that fuels self-discipline. Silence also trains us to become comfortable with discomfort. Many of us speak out of discomfort, whether it's to fill awkward silences in conversation or to avoid the tension of unresolved conflict. But choosing to stay quiet, especially when it feels uncomfortable, builds mental toughness. It teaches you that not every situation requires immediate resolution or verbal engagement. Sometimes, silence is the most disciplined and powerful response you can offer. It shows that you don't need to be reactive to be in control. In fact, the less reactive you are, the more control you actually have. In personal development, silence can be used as a tool to break bad habits and build new ones. For example, when we face cravings or urges, whether it's the desire to procrastinate, indulge in unhealthy habits, or react emotionally, staying silent in those moments is an act of self-discipline. Instead of immediately giving in to the craving or emotional impulse, silence creates a gap, a moment of mindfulness where you can choose to act in line with your long-term goals instead of seeking short-term relief. It's in those quiet moments of restraint that real change happens. Ultimately, silence enhances self-discipline by teaching us to control our impulses, regulate our emotions, and act thoughtfully rather than reactively. It helps us develop the patience needed to navigate difficult situations, whether that means holding back in an argument, refraining from indulging in distractions, or simply allowing ourselves the space to process before acting. By mastering silence, you master yourself, and in doing so, you gain the freedom to make choices that truly align with your values and aspirations. Lesson 5. Silence cultivates inner strength. The fifth lesson in harnessing the power of silence is how it cultivates inner strength. In our fast-paced world, where we are constantly bombarded with stimuli and pressured to engage, staying silent often feels like an unnatural act. We're conditioned to believe that strength is displayed through outward expressions, asserting opinions, defending ourselves, or making bold statements. However, true strength, as the Stoics knew, often comes from within, and silence is a key practice that nurtures this internal resilience. It requires a deep kind of strength to stay silent in moments where speaking might feel like the easier, more comfortable choice. Choosing silence, especially in moments of conflict or tension, is not a sign of weakness or passivity, but of immense self-control. It demonstrates the ability to rise above the noise, to not be swayed by the chaos around you, and to remain grounded. This is where inner strength is forged, in the quiet moments where you decide not to give in to the impulse to speak. Think about the last time you were in an argument or debate. The temptation to have the final word or prove your point might have been strong, but imagine if, instead of giving in to that urge, you chose silence. That silence is not an act of surrender. It's an act of choosing peace over unnecessary conflict. And in that choice, you demonstrate greater strength than words could ever convey. Silence also allows you to detach from the emotional turmoil of situations, and instead anchor yourself in a place of calm. When you don't immediately react, you give yourself time to process your emotions. Anger, frustration, or fear often distort our perceptions, leading us to speak or act in ways that we might regret later. By staying silent, you cultivate the inner strength to manage those emotions rather than be controlled by them. It's a practice of emotional self-mastery, one that strengthens your ability to handle difficult situations with grace and composure. Over time, this self-discipline builds resilience, making it easier for you to face challenges without feeling overwhelmed or reactive. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Silence gives you the space to control that reaction. Life is full of unpredictable events, some of them challenging, others frustrating. But it's in how you respond to these challenges that your true strength is revealed. When you practice silence, you gain the ability to choose how to respond, rather than being at the mercy of the moment. This sense of control fosters a powerful internal strength that doesn't rely on external circumstances. Another way silence cultivates inner strength is by reinforcing your independence from the opinions of others. So often, we feel the need to speak up, explain ourselves, or seek validation from those around us. We fear judgment or misunderstanding, so we over-explain or try to justify our actions. But when you choose silence, you demonstrate that you are not dependent on others' approval or agreement. You become comfortable with the idea that not every thought needs to be shared, and not every comment requires a response. This form of quiet confidence builds a kind of unshakable inner strength because it shows that your sense of self-worth is not tied to external validation. In relationships, silence can be a quiet form of strength as well. It's easy to think that the loudest voice wins, or that constant communication is necessary for understanding. However, in moments of tension, silence can often convey more than words. It shows that you're not afraid to sit with discomfort, to let emotions settle, and to allow the space for reflection before rushing to solve a problem or make a point. This type of strength is invaluable because it teaches you to be comfortable in your own skin, to trust in the power of patience and reflection rather than immediate reaction. Ultimately, silence builds inner strength by teaching you to be comfortable with stillness, to master your emotional responses, and to rely less on external validation for your sense of worth. It's a practice that deepens your resilience, allowing you to navigate life's challenges with more poise and less stress. In a world that constantly pushes us to be louder, faster, and more reactive, silence offers an alternative path, one that leads to inner peace and profound strength that can't be easily shaken. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of control, clarity, and strength. By saying less, you often gain more understanding, more peace, and more influence. Throughout these lessons, we've explored how silence can sharpen your mind, strengthen your relationships, and help you master your emotions. It's a quiet power that many overlook, but those who learn to wield it discover its transformative effects in every aspect of life. Now here's the question. How will you start using silence to win in your daily life? Will you practice pausing before reacting? Will you choose to listen more than you speak? The real power lies in the doing, not just the knowing. If this journey has sparked something in you, if you felt that subtle shift in how you approach your words, actions, and thoughts, then let's keep this conversation going. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or experiences. How has silence played a role in your life? And if you're ready to explore more ways to cultivate inner strength, clarity, and wisdom, don't forget to hit subscribe. We've only scratched the surface, and there's much more to uncover on this path of quiet power. Trust me, the best insights are the ones that come in the spaces between words.